This is going to be amazing. Okay, so
Also,
this one.
did you guys know, since we're talking about RFK,
Let's do it.
a lot of people talking shit about his voice, right?
Yeah.
Y'all know JFK had the same shit, right?
I did not know that.
Yeah, him and JFK had to have the same.
It's just not as developed because the CIA killed him when he was
so
young.
part of it is because JFK, he had training from his father to become a politician. So he
Word.
went through like tons of speech training to help deal with that.
Okay, like speech therapy, probably.
But if
There
you
go.
listen to also the audio recordings from 1960s are just not as good. So it's not as noticeable, but he had it handled a little bit more than RFK did. And it lends to the odd cadence in his speech. If you listen to a JFK speech, there's a little bit of like weird.
There's
look up.
It was like super mass holy. If you've ever spent any time in the Northeast, it's like super niche, kind of like New England redneck thing.
Yes.
There's something to that, the way they spoke like that.
So look up the clip of why we go to the moon, right? JFK, we go to the moon because, or we choose to go to the moon. That's what it is. Yeah, let's watch some of this. This shit might fucking give me some tears, to be honest.
YouTube.
There's some of this stuff. There's also
we choose to go to the moon.
like a clip of George Bush at Ground Zero.
I don't like that one.
When that one almost, I mean, if
I get it.
depending on
yeah.
the day, I will drop a tear when
real.
he's given his speech, because I know you know, but now we have to tell everybody else.
Yeah.
When he's given a speech at Ground Zero, and he's using, I don't even think he's using a bullhorn. I think he's just talking.
He's just talking.
And someone says in the background, like, "We can't hear you," and he says, "But I can hear you."
Yes.
And it's just such a fucking perfect, like, America moment. There isn't a more perfect thing that a leader of the nation could have chosen to say at the time other than, "I can hear you. I know what just happened. We're all in this together as Americans. I can hear you."
That's
I mean, it's a masterful,
so good, dude.
masterful choice of words.
yeah. It's so okay. So let's just reflect on this before we dive into this, son, because it's an interesting topic. You know, you and I mean, we have. I mean, I have my own thoughts about the validity of the federal government and things like that, man. But at the end of the day, you know, when you think about like in a utopic view or like a perfect world, what the office of the president is supposed to be.
Yeah.
Like he, at the end of the day, yes, he's supposed to be the executive that executes the thing that the legislative branch does. Cool. But also, you know, when it comes to foreign policy and just vibe of the nation stuff, like he needs to be a leader.
Yes.
Right. And he or she. I feel like, well, like, because like never before, but also like Tulsi's a leader. I'll say it. Tulsi Gabbard. Say what you want about her politics. I have my own choice words about that. But like when she talks, she's powerful. She's present. You know, there's a lot to that. She could be a leader. George W. Bush in that moment was a leader. Don't ask me about that. I got no ends of shit to say about how terrible the Bush era was. George Bush is probably single-handedly, his administration is single-handedly responsible for where we're at today. Major player.
Huge hand. Yeah.
Major player, right? So tons of shit to say about that. But at a certain point, when a leader needs to step up and be the figurehead, be the leader of a nation, whatever, you know, embodied moment that you need to fulfill, whatever, you know, where you need to be large. You are not a human anymore, bro. You have to be a voice of a nation. That's not you as a person. You cannot be a person at that point. You have to do that thing. It needs to be powerful. It needs to be profound. It needs to capture everybody. George W. Bush did it in that situation on 9/11. I hope JFK does it in this "we choose to go to the moon" speech. I feel like JFK did it a few times.
Lincoln did that type of thing.
Yeah, in the movie.
And
it was fantastic.
Well, what makes me think of that is last night I was reading. I was up late. Jordan's doing baking stuff, so I was reading, and then I was reading about the beaches of Normandy being stormed. Right.
Ooh.
So I started to watch.
That's powerful.
Saving Private Ryan, because I was like, I just want to let me get some visuals of this now because I'm reading about
That's
it.
the first 15 minutes of the movie.
Right. And then there's a scene
Powerful.
right when the mission to go save Ryan starts to kick off, right?
Okay.
And at like
After he grabs Upham, that poor bastard.
yeah, at battalion headquarters, there are all the commanding officers that are discussing it, right? There are the ladies writing the letters, and then
Yes.
she goes and talks to her commanding officer. He goes to his, and then he goes to his, and then they're talking to the general.
Oh, man.
And they're debating about whether or not they should go, and this guy's dead. We don't even need to go there.
And
so
he's got brothers over there.
the
Oh,
general pulls a letter from Abraham Lincoln.
yes.
And he doesn't say who it's written by until the end, but he starts to read it, and 3 lines in, you're like, it's fucking Lincoln. There isn't another person who writes
Like
this
that.
way, especially from the government. Like, this is Lincoln. And then he reads the whole thing. The last third of it, he has it memorized, you know, and it's about
Because he puts it down.
yes, it's about
powerful
a mother,
fucking movie.
a mother who lost 5 sons in the Civil War, and Abraham Lincoln wrote this letter about like, there's nothing that I could say to you that is going to overwhelm the grief that you are dealing with. All that I can hope is that you understand that your sons died for something bigger than them, bigger than you, bigger than all of us, and you deserve this. And so that's the last third of it he reads to him. But he doesn't
so
even
good.
read it. He hasn't memorized.
Yeah.
And this Abraham Lincoln, and I was like, fucking goddamn right, dude.
Yeah.
And it's that type of shit. There are
That's why, yeah.
some presidents and some world leaders that have had that thing. They haven't
Yeah.
just been the president. They have been a fucking
Yes.
leader.
So let's George W. Bush this shit, right? He had the 9/11 moment, but we have Dick Cheney, we've got Halliburton, we've got the whole thing, the wars in the Middle East. So fucking terrible. But there's that moment where they step above. Lincoln, no difference, man. Like, the more you learn about Lincoln, to realize, you know, the Democratic pushback against Lincoln, when he was like a fascist or an authoritarian,
Right.
he wanted to be king and all this. He suspended habeas corpus for a portion of the country, which is all sorts of fucked up.
We
I mean,
talk
there's
all the time about that scene in
Right,
Lincoln
there's
because
so
it's
much.
because Daniel Day-Lewis is a fucking champion. But
Yes.
that one scene in Lincoln where he's sitting in with all of his cabinet and they're
Yep.
talking about how they're going to get things done, and he has a monologue about how he is circumventing the Constitution to try and
Yes.
get this thing accomplished. And I don't want to do this, but I have no choice to do this, and
Mm-hmm.
I need you to find a way to justify me doing it because it's the only way that I can bring an end to this war.
Yeah, baby.
And it's such a fucking perfect, just a beautiful, beautiful scene of that. You have to hope there's a conversation that somewhat ended like that at some point in time, because it perfectly encapsulates what we hope the internal conflict was happening, of somebody who recognizes a role that needs to be filled, but it calls for a level of authority and might that has never been used so far in the nation, and he is concerned of the way that it will be used in the future if he sets that precedent.
yes.
It's fucking perfect the way that it's
So
written.
good.
It's amazing.
So fucking good.
If
Yes.
you have not seen Lincoln, you have got to watch.
I'm gonna
fucking
fucking watch that
Lincoln.
shit tonight,
It's
bro.
So
I'm on it.
good.
I wanna
Daniel
watch it
Day-Lewis is
the
incredible.
goat. He's the goat, bro. Daniel
Yes.
Day is the thing. But anyways, so that's the thing about this whole thing. Like, regardless of their trepidations as far as administrations go and what they do, there are some people that are just natural born leaders, and I think
Yes.
Lincoln represents that, which is why we remember him like we remember him.
Even all the terrible things that
Right?
did exist about him that are real.
If we were doing this podcast right now and Abraham Lincoln was the president and we were in that time with all the technology, we'd be saying the same shit about him. We'd be fucking cutting on him left and right,
Right.
because he's an authoritarian. He thinks he's a king. He's doing this. He's suspending, constitutional rights and all that shit. But also, and this harkens back, if you'll allow me a second, this harkens back to the ages of like the Roman consuls. There were times at which, particularly during like existential war times,
Yes.
regardless of how you got there, blah, 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 well, that's a different thing. But like, there would be a time where the word dictator comes from this,
Right.
where one of the consuls would say, I need to be dictator for a while because we need to get some shit straight. And I'm going to be a dictator for this long, and I'm going to be solely in charge, and we're going to do what I fucking say because I'm the goat. I'm out here commanding armies. We're doing this thing. It's kind of like
So we need a fucking dog
our own
right now.
version of being the dog right now. JFK, Lincoln,
Yeah.
Bush at certain points. But I don't know if you can carry that directly over, but that's, I think, where the concept comes from, because even as a republic, you can identify that as like a homie being a G at the time when he needs to be
Yeah.
a G, to step up, take control, fix everything, and then fucking back away back into the ether,
Yeah,
bro.
no, I think the metaphor is good, and I think it extends to JFK. If the same deal as Bush, if we look at his cabinet, the people that were there were lying to him intentionally. The people that were already involved in the defense,
Yeah.
in the Defense Department, in the military, who carried over into into his administration because they were already involved in Vietnam. They were lying to him.
AKA the deep state.
They knew what the reality of that war was, and they knew that he wanted to end it, and they knew that that couldn't happen if they wanted to keep doing what they were doing. He's the same person that said that he wanted to tear down the CIA. He's the same person that said that he wanted to end the fucking Fed.
Which is why JFK Jr. or RFK Jr. right now is terrified for his life.
These are the reasons that he was killed, and these are the things that make him stand out as a leader. And it's why all of his faults, all of the adultery, the drugs, all the things that you can attribute to him. That's why we still look to him as someone who was a fucking leader for the nation when we needed it. He was a dog when we needed it.
Because when you really think about it, when the nation needs a leader, the nation doesn't need a leader that's the person. Like a person, an individual, a single human being.
Yes.
Because the nation itself is not a person or anything like that. It's an idea. It's a concept. It's about, ideally, it's about freedom and liberty and people just figuring it out and doing their thing, right? And so when the time comes, there are certain times in history, which is really awesome to think about, actually, in retrospect. It's kind of a white pill moment. It's kind of a white pill moment to realize you could step back from all the bullshit that all these people have done and essentially held the country together at certain points in time because they had an out of body moment where they were no longer John F. Kennedy.
Right.
They were a leader. They were the president of the United States, which is what it should be.
Yeah.
Right. The president of the United States in the perfect world should be the person, even an anarchist, would like to give consenting authority to. You know what I mean? Like the true president of the United States should, when a leader needs to be present, when the nation needs a leader of individuals, they can rise above everything else to become the leader of a massive group of individuals who all have the same common goal of like the most individualistic lifestyle. I mean, this is like the most difficult persona to embody if you're doing it right.
Yeah.
And a few of them motherfuckers have for slight moments in time, for small blips, not during their whole presidency, no, nothing, but for like 4 or 5 minutes of their entire life, of the nation's entire life, they were able to rise above themselves and become like a true leader to tell everybody what they needed to hear.
And that time, even for the founding fathers, it was never their
profound up in this bitch.
And I think that you're right. I think that you're right because even with the founding fathers, it wasn't their whole presidency. They were John Adams is suspending free speech for certain times. Like you can't fucking say that about the leaders of the nation.
No,
that's crazy shit.
Fuck you.
Yeah. So but that time, I think. This is such a beautiful thing that we're doing right now.
Exactly.
the part of where we're at in the nation, and this is coming from two fucking anti-government guys.
Amen.
Part of the reason we're at the struggle is that time in which presidents have been leaders and not individuals has shortened and shortened with every president that we have had who has been worthy of holding that position. Not president, but of leader. Because we've had tons of shitty presidents that weren't leaders. They were just presidents. They were guys that filled the office. They did the thing they needed to do, and they moved on.
Yeah. It's not good.
That time frame in which presidents were leaders has become shorter and shorter the longer we have been a country.
And that, good sir, is what makes us the most pro-America anti-government show you know.
Let's watch this.
Welcome to the salt of the streets, coming at you every week with this food for thought. Hope you ready to eat everything.